I hold a clearance level so high it doesn't have a public name. But to my mother-in-law, I am the woman who wasn't good enough to marry her son. The day she said it out loud, in front of everyone at her Easter table, was the day I decided I was done being quiet. My name is Sloan. I'm 32 years old. I've worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency for 9 years. I analyze signals intelligence from foreign adversaries, write assessments that land on the desks of cabinet members, and once spent 72 hours in a windowless room in Stuttgart preventing a supply chain attack on 3 NATO bases. I drive a 2017 Honda Civic with a cracked passenger side mirror and a coffee stain on the center console that I've been meaning to clean since last March. None of that mattered the first time I walked into my mother-in-law's house. What mattered was that I wasn't a doctor. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a partner at a firm or a VP of anything with a view of a city skyline. I worked for the government, and in her world, government work was what people did when they didn't have options. My husband's name is Patrick. We met at Georgetown. He was studying international law. I was finishing my thesis on geopolitical risk modeling. He thought I was brilliant. His mother thought I was convenient. She made that clear at Christmas of our first year together. I brought homemade cranberry sauce. She looked at it the way you look at a parking ticket. She said sweetly, in that specific tone she had perfected over 6 decades, "How thoughtful." I already made mine from scratch, but we'll find a room for yours on the table. She found a room at the very end, next to the butter dish, untouched. I told myself it was just first impression nerves. I told myself she was adjusting. I told myself a lot of things in those early years. Patrick's family was old Virginia money. His grandfather had been a federal judge. His mother, whom everyone called by her first name, Lorraine, ran the family foundation with the kind of iron authority that got mistaken for grace. She had opinions about everything. Flowers at weddings, the right neighborhoods, the correct way to hold a fork. She had opinions about me, mostly the unspoken kind, delivered through long pauses and redirected compliments. She would say things like, "Patrick always dated such ambitious girls before," or, "It's so practical of you to stay in your lane, dear. Not everyone needs to climb." I stayed quiet. I smiled. I said thank you for dinner. I had been trained to hold information close. I had been trained to read a room, identify the threat, assess the risk, and respond only when necessary. I applied that training to Lorraine for 6 years. She never knew she was being assessed. The Easter Sunday that changed everything started the way they all did. Patrick and I drove out to her house in McLean, Virginia, 40 minutes from our apartment in Alexandria. The house was large and white and immaculate, set back from the road behind a row of dogwood trees that bloomed every spring like they were performing for her. The neighborhood smelled like mulch and old money. Patrick's sister Gwen was already there with her husband Christopher. Christopher was a cardiologist. Gwen was a pediatric dentist. They had 2 children under 5 and a Volvo with a university decal in the back window. They were, in Lorraine's cosmology, the correct kind of people. Then there was Patrick's brother, Miles, who had just made partner at a firm in Richmond. Miles had a girlfriend named Felicity who worked in pharmaceutical sales and wore blazers that fit perfectly and said things like absolutely and 100% and laughed at everything Lorraine said. And then there was me. I'd come straight from an early morning briefing. I hadn't told Patrick that. I'd told him I needed to run an errand first and would meet him there. The errand was a 2-hour debrief on an intercept that had come in overnight from a station in Eastern Europe. I had been awake since 4 in the morning. I was wearing the same gray blazer I'd worn to the office on Friday, because I hadn't had time to go home and change. My hair was up. My eyes were tired. Lorraine opened the door and looked at me the way a schoolteacher looks at a child who has come in late without a hall pass. "You look exhausted, sweetheart," she said, not unkindly, but not kindly either. "Long week," I said. "Patrick says you're always busy. It must be nice to feel needed." She said it with a smile and stepped aside to let me in. The dining room smelled like glazed ham and Easter lilies. The table was set with the good china, the kind that had been in her family since before the zip code existed. Place cards, cloth napkins folded into bishops, A centerpiece that required instructions. I sat where my place card told me to sit, between Patrick and a large floral arrangement that partially blocked my view of the window. A tactical disadvantage. Old habit. The first hour was the usual. Miles talked about a case he couldn't discuss, but discussed anyway in the vaguest terms that still made him sound important. Christopher talked about a procedure he'd performed that had apparently required extraordinary skill. Gwen talked about the children, who were at the kids' table in the next room eating without ceremony. Felicity said absolutely 11 times. I counted. Patrick held my hand under the table. He knew I was tired. He didn't know why. Lorraine controlled the room the way she always did, refilling glasses before anyone asked, redirecting conversations with a surgeon's precision, asking questions she already knew the answers to. Then she asked one she thought she knew the answer to. "So, Sloane," she said, settling back with her wine, "what is it you do again?" I always forget the exact title. I'd heard this question from her at least a dozen times. She never forgot. She asked it so she could hear me describe my job in terms that sounded small. Intelligence analysis, I said. Defense Department. Right. She nodded as if this confirmed something she'd been thinking. So data entry, essentially. Government spreadsheets. Patrick shifted beside me. Not exactly, I said. Well, I mean, analysis. She waved a hand gently. You're looking at numbers, writing reports, that sort of thing. Support work. I support national security decisions, yes, she smiled. It was the smile she kept for people she pitied. That's wonderful. Every machine needs its parts, doesn't it? Gwen looked at her plate. Miles looked at Christopher. Christopher was looking at his phone under the table. Miles just had a case that went to the federal appellate level, Lorraine said, pivoting with the ease of a woman who had never felt the need to apologize for a pivot. Tell them, Miles, Miles told them. I ate my ham. It was good ham, I gave it that. But Lorraine wasn't done. She had been building towards something all afternoon. I had noticed it the way I noticed things. Quietly, without signaling that I noticed. The way she'd angled her chair slightly toward Miles when she talked about professional accomplishment. The way she'd asked me twice, casually, whether Patrick and I had any plans to make some changes in our lives. Which was her way of asking why I hadn't quit yet to have children. The way she'd told Felicity her blazer was just gorgeous, and then looked at my gray jacket and said nothing. She had been preparing something. I had felt it building the way you feel a weather system moving in. And when it came in the middle of dessert. She was talking about Patrick. She was always most dangerous when she was talking about Patrick. He was the most extraordinary child, she was saying, cutting a small, precise square of carrot cake. His father knew from the time he was 8 years old that he was going to do something that mattered, something that left a mark. She smiled at Patrick, full of warm, possessive love. Then she looked at me. I always hoped he'd find someone who matched that energy. Someone who could be a real partner to him. Someone with ambition. Lorraine, Patrick said quietly, I'm just saying what's true, sweetheart. I don't mean it as criticism. She folded her hands. It's just hard, when your child is capable of so much, to watch him make choices that hold him back. The table went very still. I set my fork down, parallel to the knife. It was a habit. It helped. I don't think I'm holding Patrick back, I said. No, of course you don't, dear. She smiled. That's the thing about people who are content with small lives. They don't feel the smallness. It's actually a gift. I looked at Patrick. His jaw was tight. He opened his mouth, and I did something I had never done in 6 years at that table. I spoke first. Lorraine, I said. My voice was quiet, steady. What exactly do you think I do? You analyze data for the government. You said so. What kind of data? She blinked. This was not the script. I was supposed to deflect, or agree, or ask about the carrot cake recipe. I don't know, dear. Numbers. Reports. Whatever they have you doing. I track the movement of foreign intelligence assets, I said. I assess threat vectors from adversarial state actors. I write the briefing documents that inform decisions at the cabinet level. Last month, I spent 4 days in a CIV coordinating with Allied intelligence services on a counter-proliferation operation that I cannot describe to you in any further detail. The room was quiet. A CIF, Lorraine repeated. Sensitive compartmented information facility. A sealed room. No windows, no phones, no outside contact. She stared at me. Then she made a small, dismissive sound, the kind that meant she was recalibrating. Well, I suppose everyone thinks their job is very important. That was when Miles, of all people, put his fork down and said, "Lorraine, stop." She turned to him surprised. Miles never interrupted her. Miles had been performing for her approval since he was 7 years old. "She's not talking about a filing job," he said. "Do you even know what a counter-proliferation operation is?" Miles, Because I do, he said, "and if she's involved in that, she's not pushing paper." Lorraine turned back to me. The confidence had shifted in her eyes, just slightly, the way it does when someone realizes they've been arguing with the wrong assumption. "You never talk about any of this," she said. "No," I agreed. "I don't. Why?" "Because I'm not allowed to, and because I was raised to believe that doing important work quietly was more valuable than talking about it loudly." Something moved across her face. I didn't wait for her to recover. "I have sat at this table for 6 years," I said. "I have listened to you tell me, in various ways, that I am not enough for your son, that I am small, that my work is support work, that I am a part in a machine." I picked up my wine glass and took a slow sip. "I want to be clear with you, Lorraine. I do not hold a grudge about it. I understand that you love Patrick, and that love makes people protective, and sometimes protective people become cruel without meaning to." I set the glass down, but I will not sit here and be told my life is small by someone who has never once asked what my life actually is. No one at the table moved. Lorraine opened her mouth, closed it. Patrick was looking at me the way he had looked at me across a crowded university library 14 years ago, like he was seeing something he hadn't fully seen before. I stood up, smoothly, without drama. "Thank you for dinner, Lorraine. The ham was excellent." I looked at Gwen, who was staring at me with something that looked, for the first time in 6 years, like genuine interest. "Tell the kids Happy Easter from me." I walked to the foyer. I put on my coat. Patrick was beside me in 30 seconds. In the car, he didn't say anything for the first 2 miles. Then he said, "I'm sorry. I should have. You don't have to apologize for her." I let it go on too long. "Yes," I said, "you did, but that's a different conversation." He nodded. He knew I was right. That was one of the things I had always loved about him. He knew when he was wrong without needing it performed for him. We drove home in the kind of quiet that isn't empty. It's the quiet of 2 people who have been together long enough to know that some things need to settle before they can be spoken. I did not expect what happened 3 days later. Lorraine called me, not Patrick, me, directly. She had never called me directly in 6 years of marriage. I almost didn't answer. I was in the middle of reviewing a threat assessment, and my personal phone rarely rang during work hours, and when it did, it was usually Patrick or my mother or a dentist reminder. I saw her name and I sat with it for a moment. I answered. "I want to apologize," she said. No preamble, no softening, just the words delivered in a voice that cost her something. I was quiet. "I have been unkind to you," she said, "for a long time. And I have told myself it was concern for Patrick, but that's not the whole truth. The truth is that you frightened me." She paused. "You've always frightened me a little. You don't need anything from anyone. You walk into a room and you don't look for approval. I've never known how to read that in a person. It made me assume the worst." I was sitting in my car in the parking garage of my building. The fluorescent lights hummed. "I don't know how to respond to that, Lorraine," I said honestly. "You don't have to respond to anything. I just needed to say it." Another pause. "Patrick loves you. He has always loved you. And I think I've spent 6 years being afraid that you would decide he wasn't worth staying for, that you were too self-sufficient to need a family. And instead of letting that fear make me welcoming, I let it make me cruel. I looked at my reflection in the dark windshield. I'm not too self-sufficient to need a family, I said. I'm just not willing to trade my dignity for a seat at the table. She was quiet for a long moment. I understand that now. We didn't become close after that. I want to be honest about that, because the clean version of this story would have us bonding over coffee and laughing about misunderstandings, and that is not what happened. What happened was something quieter and more durable. She stopped performing her disappointment in me. She started asking me questions, real questions, not the kind designed to diminish. Once, at Thanksgiving, she asked me what the hardest part of my job was, and I told her the truth, which was that the hardest part was knowing that the right decision and the safe decision are not always the same thing, and that you have to make your peace with that before you can do the work effectively. She listened. She didn't offer a reframe. She just said, "That sounds like a very lonely kind of responsibility." And I said, "It is." And she nodded like she understood something she hadn't understood before. I don't know if that counts as forgiveness. I think it counts as something more honest than forgiveness. It counts as two people who had been wrong about each other, deciding to be accurate. The moment I think about most, when I think about all of it, isn't the Easter table. It isn't the phone call. It's something smaller. It was about 8 months after that Easter Sunday. Patrick and I were at his mother's house for a birthday dinner for Gwen. Lorraine had set the table the same way she always did. Good china, cloth napkins, place cards. I sat where my card told me to sit. Lorraine came out of the kitchen carrying a dish and paused behind my chair. She put her hand on my shoulder, briefly, not dramatically, and she said, quietly enough that only I could hear it, "I'm glad you're here, Sloane." She moved on before I could respond. She set the dish on the table and called everyone to sit down. But I noticed, for the first time, that my place card was not at the end near the butter dish. It was at the middle of the table, between Patrick and Gwen, where the conversation pooled naturally, where people leaned in when they talked. I don't know if she moved it intentionally. I think she did. I sat down. I put my napkin in my lap. Patrick refilled my water glass without being asked, the way he always did. And I thought about the version of myself who had walked into this house 6 years ago ready to be liked, and the version sitting here now who had long since stopped needing to be. My work requires me to hold information other people don't have, to carry knowledge I cannot share, to make decisions in the dark that light the way for people who will never know my name. I have learned to be at peace with invisibility. I have learned that the most powerful thing in any room is often the thing you cannot see. But sitting there, at that table, in the middle of the conversation, I let myself be seen. Just a little. Just enough. That was enough.